Whoops. Let's start over. I'm Charting Man Dan with the chart, guys. I've been trading for the last 14 and a half years. We're going to check in on the markets as we start the week with a solid green move across all markets out there. NASDAQ leading the bounce, and crypto and alts definitely enjoying it as well. So Bitcoin with the new bounce high, every leg up that we get from here increases probabilities that a monthly high or low is being set. But the bulls want to make their way ideally 50% plus bounce retracement from, really ideally from the high, but bulls would settle and take 50% bounce retracement from the last little lower high, which we have at this point. So that's a good sign. Essentially, what we're going to be looking for is, again, eventually a weekly lower high. Same thing as the NASDAQ. We're going to look at that in just a moment because it definitely matters. But the best case for the bulls, create the space so that when we top out next from here, we can form a higher low and try and regain the weekly uptrend. That's the hope for the bulls. At this point, the clarity that I have, we've got these clear little daily higher lows. So we can mark those, the low, little higher low, new little higher low there at 83.1. And we can also just draw a 12-hour channel that we are currently trading in. Ideally, the bulls want to break above this channel, obviously. But just a nice little visual guide, nice and clean, 12-hour channel. So I'm keeping an eye on that. And the next resistance level after the current high of this bounce, 88.8 thousand. We can see it's up here in the low 90s. So essentially 91 to about 93 is the resistance zone from here. But the bulls just want to maintain these 12-hour higher lows as long as they can. And again, a lot of this today has to do with the NASDAQ. The NASDAQ was on the verge of a daily bear flag. Friday morning, we double bottomed at support, had a nice close, gap up open on futures overnight, and a strong day. And so again, the weekly bounce is underway here. The Bitcoin bulls led the weekly bounce in the sense that the weekly bounce was already underway there. And so obviously they're benefiting now that the NASDAQ has its weekly bounce underway. But it's the same question. If you're a Bitcoin bull, you want the NASDAQ here to bounce as much as possible. And we still got Trump tariff headlines always coming out, but we're keeping an eye on what's this bounce retracement. We know if it's 382 or less, it favors bear flag continuation. We know if it's 50% plus bounce retracement or more, it then favors an equilibrium. So crypto bulls just want the NASDAQ and S&P 500 to follow through a bit, alleviate the fear, and again, give themselves space to work with, because we are either going to do this, which is what we did in August for bulls to regain control, or do this, which was start the 2022 bear market by confirming a weekly downtrend. The next few weeks are pretty critical for what we're going to expect in Q2 for both the NASDAQ and by default, Bitcoin. The dominance chart still not giving us any information. As long as this level's holding, then we know Bitcoin is favored over alts. But last 2 weeks, nothing changing here. So again, I pull up this chart, I look at it every couple of days, but recently there's no real analysis to do. Just check it. Is anything changing? No. Okay, move on. ETH, weekly bounce underway. Again, tons of work to do. Anything under 28.55 is just a lower high. These bulls must follow through for another 15% plus if we're going to create space for a weekly trend change attempt. We're in a clear weekly downtrend, and we have been for months at this point. We have to see the trend change. And we know ETH BTC is still very weak overall. It's trying to get a weekly bounce going, but again, nothing changing there. We will say that it's something different when I've said this for over a year at this point, when ETH BTC breaks the weekly lower highs for the first time, I guess it's not quite a year, for the first time in 9 months, then we'll say things are shifting. This is different. But if we don't break the weekly lower highs, it's the same thing as the last 9 months. So our last little weekly lower high is here. Haven't even started the weekly bounce, but if it's just another lower high, nothing changes. So that's going to be our guide. And if you're sitting there waiting and saying, when's it time for ETH? When's it time for ETH related names like ENS? Then you've got to see this chart shift. And we have to see signs that something is different on this chart. And that's going to take a little bit. And the reason I'm watching ENS as well is, again, it had a nice hold of this support. It's just a very clear long-term support. There's a number of names with a very clear long-term support to potentially play off of. And again, this is a very low cap name, but when it's ETH's time to shine, expecting ENS to benefit a good bit. XRP, as we know, has been a lead bull. Need to be a bit cautious just in case. If we cannot break this bounce high, the news reaction high of 259, again, go to the weekly. What's the most likely scenario? Well, anything under $3 is just a weekly lower high. So we're not going to rule out a weekly lower high being on the table. And on these weekly bounces, we know that, how do you identify a weekly lower high is forming? You're on the daily chart and you're looking for bearish patterns, whether it's a head and shoulders, a rising wedge, or just a straight up loss of the uptrend. That's the first indication that a weekly lower high is being set. So we're going to be looking for that on Bitcoin and a number of altcoins over the next few weeks, just like we're going to be looking for it on the NASDAQ. And so XRP, daily time frame, if we can't break 259 and we set a daily lower high and then we drop down and break 235, that confirms a daily downtrend. And that would tell us the weekly lower high is being set. So big bounce, higher low, higher high on news, higher low. Can we continue the uptrend with fresh highs, or do we set that lower high? That's what we're looking for on XRP over the next 2 days, really. Binance has been a stronger name. It's keeping its little higher lows going. Tight range trying to break bull here over the recent highs in the low 640s and upper 630s. And again, the reason I'm watching Binance is because it has a support level it held, our fear flush low. And again, I'm looking for a weekly equilibrium here is the most likely scenario, where we just have a very wide range, and the most likely scenario will be just a tightening range within it. And so anything under 732 is a weekly lower high. There's no sign of a weekly lower high just yet, but we know to be keeping an eye out for it in the next couple of weeks. Trump, so I can't believe we live in a world where the president is pumping a meme coin, but here we are. So Trump yesterday pumps his meme coin. I don't think he typed it, but whatever. It goes up. I mean, if you look at this chart and you tell me Trump pumped his meme coin, I would say where? So it's certainly law of diminishing returns in terms of, his mention of it. And look at the clear rejection. I mean, this is a bear gift. It was a bear gift. When you have a clear resistance, 1245, and then we double top 1246, you want to test resistance or support when you're as extended as possible on shorter term time frames. If I have more conviction when, even like if I'm playing a back burner, I played the metal miners on Friday because it was an hourly back burner. But when we were hitting first hourly oversold after a daily and weekly breakout, we were doing so when the 5 and the 15-minute RSI were in the teens. That makes me more confident. The short-term timeframes are crushed using my longer-term signal of the hourly back burner. It's the same concept where for, Trump bears, just looking at a double top of resistance, we pop on the tweet and we head to that resistance level with the 5-minute RSI up at in the 90s. We were in the 90s on the 5-minute RSI. The 15-minute RSI got up into overbought. It was up in the 70s or 80s. And then we reject. Where are we? There we are. 15-minute RSI. It was probably a super stack. Hourly super stack, but it fired pretty early. Anyways, you get my point. We were very extended into resistance. That gives bears confidence that bulls are tired. I just imagine the analogy is resistance is a wall that you've got to climb over. And if you're sprinting, just imagine a big fat bull sprinting towards a wall. By the time you get to the wall and you have to jump over it, you've used up all your energy on the sprint. You don't have the energy to get over that wall. So bigger picture on Trump. We're still going to be watching for a weekly bounce to get going eventually. But it's all about 1246 very clearly. It's now a triple top at this point. 4-hour equilibrium. So high, higher low, lower high. We're going to scout another higher low. And we'll see the direction that that 4-hour tightening range breaks. If it breaks bull, we'll test that triple top again. But just a good example of, again, short-term time frames being extended into a clear level and playing off of that level. As far as other names, again, Link was another name that had a long-term support level that was holding. You can see back here. No, it was Sol. Sorry. Sol, long-term support level, held. Let's go to the weekly. So again, support, 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 support. And we held it again. Weekly bounce underway. Again, could these be weekly bear flags on a lot of these names? Yes, weekly bear flags are on the table. The bulls need to prove to us with bounce retracement follow through that it's not a weekly bear flag. And so again, you know, for a name like Sol to negate a bear flag, we need a lot more follow through. We need, you know, 190s if that's going to be the case. That's a long ways away. And again, the most important thing in the short term is, can bulls maintain the daily higher lows as long as possible to keep this weekly bounce going? All right. Reading the chat. Destroy that like button. Appreciate that. MNT. So daily uptrend confirmed. Just confirming here. So our new daily higher low is 772. Breaking 8412, good sign. So now we zoom out to the weekly. We remind ourselves anything under 113 is just a weekly lower high. How long can the bulls maintain a daily uptrend before we lose it? And the longer we keep it going, the more bounce retracement we get to try and create the space for a weekly trend change. So again, it's, you know, once the bears have control of the weekly and daily trend, bulls have a checklist. Okay, we need to confirm an hourly trend change off the bottom. Check. Okay, we got to confirm a daily trend change off the bottom. Now that's a check. Next check mark that the bulls need is a confirmed weekly trend change off the bottom. And that's going to take a while. You know, ideally, bulls get another week or two of bounce. Then we pull back for a week or two. Then we see continuation for a week or two. It can take a while on those longer term time frames for things to shape up. BTC dominance is topping, says love and win. And I say maybe, but you've got to break that base there. Break that and I'll say, okay, things are clearly shifting and I will be agreeing with you. But I'm not going to try and call a top without the signs that it is clearly shifting. And we've been setting weekly higher lows for months again. And so that's got to change. Thanks for the compliment, Silent Nature. Catalin from Romania. MATIC. Haven't looked at MATIC in a long time, and that's why. I mean, any hope for it? It's one of the most bearish coins out there, just in the sense that we're at fresh lows. I mean, it's a big red flag. We're just in a monthly, weekly, daily downtrend. So we're in a downtrend on every single time frame. I want more history. Is that all the history we have? I guess so. So yeah, all-time lows, it's just a really bad look. So we're sideways on the daily. Maybe we can get a daily bounce going as a laggard. We need to get over the 22s more convincingly. But again, we just have so much space for a weekly lower high to be the result of the next bounce. And we don't even have to look at MATIC BTC, but we know it's just an absolute bear feast of relative weakness. Let's look at MSTR real quick. MSTR has had relative strength. And it stood out to end last week. So here's MSTR breaking, and we got news over the weekend that Saylor's we knew Saylor was buying because he posts his orange dot thing when he's buying on the weekend. But breaking to the highest level, MSTR here in a month. And so where would Bitcoin be if it was at its highest level in a month? We'd be trading up in the mid to upper 90s. So, you can also just do MSTR divided by Bitcoin and show you that it's been relative strength the last few weeks. So that's a good sign for bulls. Again, same deal as Bitcoin. Bulls are trying to set the monthly higher low off EMA 12 that held the last time around. Giving themselves some space to work with. Can we confirm the weekly uptrend whenever we top out? That's the question for so many things in markets right now. We haven't topped out yet. Bulls want some more follow through first. But once that happens, do we confirm weekly uptrends in the NASDAQ, in Bitcoin, in these altcoins? Generally speaking, if you're a Bitcoin bull, I'd say you want to see gold top. We know gold's been a raging bull. It's been outperforming Bitcoin the last 52 weeks. But the general periods where Bitcoin is surging has been here and here when gold trades sideways. So you want to see gold top. Can't hurt Bitcoin if gold tops out more meaningfully, but no sign of that in any meaningful way at the moment. SNAI, don't know that one. So need to clear this short-term sideways zone. Got to get over 2807. If we do, the weekly bounce is underway. We'll then look up to 37 as key resistance. But again, it's another name where the most likely scenario will be a weekly lower high. There's a lot of space for it to form. So an aggressive bull can be looking to break the weekly stair-step drop into a weekly bounce. But just you got to always keep it in the back of your mind. Okay, something changes, right? So daily time frame, we break the sideways range bull. If we do, okay, something has changed. Zoom out. What's the most likely scenario from there? A weekly lower high. Can it be a worthwhile bull trade before that weekly lower high has been set? Absolutely, that's possible. You can position for that, but you don't forget the most likely scenario is the weekly lower high. That keeps you on your toes and keeps you from getting complacent. All right, a few more. So MSTR, I didn't really do technical analysis. The next key resistance level on MSTR. Bulls want to close over 321 today, which is that previous resistance here. Next resistance, looking up at 344.89. Pretty much the 340s has a decent wall there. And we're just watching the daily uptrend here as well. Anything above 270, 250 will be a daily higher low next consolidation. So same thing. How long can bulls maintain a daily uptrend to keep the weekly bounce going? When we lose the daily uptrend, we zoom out and bulls hope for the weekly higher low. So nothing, I'm gonna look at some names real quickly and say everything that I just said. So same thing, daily uptrend, new bounce high on FIL, okay, great. Little resistance here at 322 to be watching. We know the weekly lower high is the most likely scenario. We've got a key resistance here. 350s is a tough wall. 350, upper 350, lower 360s. Bulls need follow through to create the space for an eventual weekly trend change attempt. If bulls cannot confirm weekly uptrends, this is just a short-term bounce in a longer-term downtrend. Pepe USDT, same thing, weekly bounce underway, follow through needed, daily uptrend is our guide. You can put some resistance levels just like I did on Bitcoin, an uptrending resistance level on the 12-hour, something to keep an eye on. When we lose the daily uptrend, weekly lower high is likely set, etc. Bulls definitely need another leg up to try and negate weekly bear flags as being a possibility. Will I use the ETH? Wait, one more auction. This had crazy volatility over the weekend. Oof, brutal. This is where I would have anticipated a 4-hour equilibrium being the most likely scenario. And then the red flag is the big increasing bear volume and then just falling through support. And that's enough of a red flag for me as a bull to say, I'm not going anywhere near this thing. With that kind of volume and that kind of bear follow through, you know, again, I don't know anything about this coin, but it's what are the metrics, the tokenomics, what do they call it? For me, stock minded, it's what's the share structure. So, you know, what are the outstanding coins? Who's holding them? Because again, you know, some altcoins can have terrible share structures, coin structures, and that can just lead to downward pressure forever. So big red flags here. And as far as the bulls trying to get a bounce going, we're looking at the 22s as a wall right now. But again, you know, this is, to me, this chart says bulls had their chance. And I personally wouldn't, you know, it's possible we get a daily bounce going that's worthwhile, but it's enough of a red flag for me to stay away. Will I use the ETH BTC chart before focusing on Ethereum long? Yes, definitely. That's kept me from doing it for months and months and months and months and months. So I'm just going to keep using that as a guide. And again, it was the same thing. I just keep referencing other trades because I'm trading everything, but I traded natural gas for the first time in years when we were shaping up the first weekly uptrend in over a year. And so again, if ETH BTC hasn't broken weekly lower highs in 9+ months, I know nothing changes until that changes. So natural gas confirming the first weekly uptrend in over a year then leads to very significant follow through. You don't have to nail the bottom to benefit. You look for the signs that something is changing. You identify the clear definitive statement, nothing changes unless blah, blah, blah. And then when that happens, it can be a longer term signal. Bitcoin was the same thing. I keep using this example, but back in the teens, Bitcoin had not confirmed a weekly uptrend in 6+ months. And the first time it did was the bottom. And you didn't have to nail the bottom entering into weakness. If you waited for the first confirmed weekly uptrend in 6+ months, you're in at 18.5 thousand. And we never revisited that price from that point forward. Seems so easy in hindsight, doesn't it? Why am I leaning bullish in markets in regards to tariffs and trade wars? So I was leaning bullish for these weekly bounces. So now the weekly bounces are underway. So now I'm a bit less bullish, right? Just in the sense that, okay, this is what I was looking for. And now I'm going to be scouting for a weekly lower high. Not every day, not every minute, but in the coming weeks, I know I'm scouting a weekly lower high. I will shift my tune very clearly if we confirm the weekly downtrend. But the reason I was looking for these weekly bounces is a number of names hit daily back burner scenarios. First daily oversold conditions from all-time highs. Generally, you get a bounce. And there's a number of names that got that. NVDA didn't quite get there, but again, it just reminds me, I used this example on a live stream this morning, but it reminds me of back in the spring of 2024, almost a year ago. We dumped in markets a decent bit. It was first daily oversold into a monthly higher low and then monthly continuation. And, you know, Bitcoin, first daily oversold from all-time highs. We did get a little bit of a lower low, but again, generally you'll get a bounce, and we have the bounce now. So now it's just a question of how much bounce follow through do we get? One day at a time. You know, these numbers fluctuate. What percentage do I try to maintain between between longer term swing trading and day trading in my bankroll? I'm shifting bigger picture the last couple of years, but essentially it's my IRA for swing trading and my day trading account for day trading, crypto is its own thing. I'm not day trading crypto. It does not make sense to day trade crypto in the US if you are subject to the fees that the vast majority of everybody is subject to. If you've got stocks that are fee-free and you're comparing it to crypto, again, I can show you Tesla or PLTR or all these other names that have more volatility than Bitcoin. And so that's where you're day trading. So anyways, I would say, my day trading account is still 3.5 times my swing trading account. It's shifting as I shift my focus. I will eventually, as soon as I keep pumping those numbers up in my IRA, there will be enough cash there where that's just where I do my day trading. So I'm not paying taxes on it each year. But that's the answer. Gap ups and gap downs are definitely difficult with stocks if you're coming from crypto. The alternative is trading futures, which can still have gaps, but it's much less common. But the way I get around it is I'm generally taking a day trade position and then I trim it so I have profit cushion to work with. If Tesla's giving me an hourly bounce and I'm playing an hourly oversold bounce, and I'm just making these numbers up, but I'm in at 250 and I'm out half at 255. And then we bounce a little bit and we close the day 255. I can then have a break even of 245, and maybe that's ideally below the low of the day. Smaller position size, always on my swing trades because I don't have that complete control. And then I have profit cushion and I let that swing trade then try and play out. So I essentially, the majority of my swing trades come from day trades that were initially larger positions because I'm very comfortable day trading. I have complete control, place my stop. I know it'll hit. Even if news comes out when I'm in the middle of the trade, it will hit my stop. And then I size down, ideally in some profit, to then have a lower cost basis to give me the cushion for the swing trade. And make sure and check out, I'll find it for you, but Chart Guys, Crypto to Stocks. I made a video for people that are switching from crypto to stocks. Essentially, I want all crypto traders to trade stocks, and I want all stock traders to have some exposure to crypto. Just give yourself as much opportunity as possible, being comfortable in as many markets as possible. All right, one more Pendle, and then we'll wrap it up. Trying to hold a base of support longer term. Double bottom down there, so you can see this looks like almost like XRP and how it's responding to $2. So we did break it, but no follow through. 181 is a double bottom. So weekly bounce is underway. I'd say the next clear resistance zone is 380. This is the kind of setup where, let's go to the 2-day time frame, where I'd be looking for some kind of inverse head and shoulders. If we're going to put in a longer term bottom, again, need another leg up, but watching for this to be some kind of, if we get another leg up, but don't break the 380s, then we look for the right shoulder to try and form, and that would be the weekly trend change. That would be that inverse head and shoulders shaping up. Get another leg up, set the lower high as the most likely scenario, but then confirm the trend change. Just like natural gas, that bottom was a weekly inverse head and shoulders. We knew that, and the way I play that inverse head and shoulders is I know that lower high is most likely, so I don't play it then. I say, okay, that's a big enough bounce that I missed. That's a big enough bounce where I know a weekly high or low is the most likely scenario. And so I grab the weekly high or low to have better risk reward. And even then, I'm entering my position well off of the lows. Again, I'm not nailing the bottom by any means. I'm I'm 25% off the low by the time I'm entering. But if it's a longer term setup and I'm looking for, multiple months, then you can be 25% off the low and still get 50% to the upside, depending on the volatility of the instrument you're trading. But my point is, the longer term the time frame of the setup, the more you don't need to nail the bottom for it still to be a very worthwhile trade. All right, appreciate you all. Thanks again for the likes and the shares. Again, make sure and follow along with my weekend broader market videos, because we know the NASDAQ is extremely important for the next couple of weeks here. But overall, Bitcoin bulls, very pleased. Thanks, Michael Saylor, for helping out a bit. And can we get a big enough bounce? This is the question for April. Can we get a big enough weekly bounce to eventually confirm the weekly uptrend and set the monthly higher low? Do good things.